To some, Abby was the villain. To others, a necessary evil. And to many, she felt like everything the original game stood against. But what if Abby Anderson wasn't just a killer? What if she was someone who lost more than we were ever allowed to truly understand? A character buried beneath controversy, pacing, and presentation. Because the moment we picked up the controller in The Last of Us Part 2, we were handed a clear emotional path. We were Ellie. We were grieving. We spent hours gathering upgrades, skills, and tools, all with one goal in mind: find the person who took Joel away. And just when we were at our most focused, our most emotionally locked in, the game switched. Suddenly, we were in Abby's shoes. Someone we hated, someone we didn't fully understand yet, and more importantly, we were asked to care about her. But the more time we spent with her, the more we saw the truth. She wasn't just a marauder or a monster. She was once a kind, bright kid who loved her father and tragically watched him die. That moment didn't just change her, it broke her. And everything we see in the game, her brutality, her strength, her cold resolve, was all built on top of that pain. Abby isn't a poorly written character. If anything, she's one of the most misunderstood. Her story has weight, purpose, and a quiet tragedy buried beneath the noise of backlash and pacing missteps. This is a closer look at who she really is and what survival really took from her. She wasn't some bloodthirsty monster. She wasn't a nameless raider or a heartless brute. She was someone who fell into a pattern we've seen time and time again. A person shaped by grief, driven by vengeance, and clinging to the hope that revenge might silence the pain. But vengeance doesn't erase grief. It only buries it deeper. To understand Abby, to truly see the person beneath the scars, we have to go back. Back to a time before Joel. Back to who she was and the world she believed in. Back to the Fireflies.
You can still rise with us. Remember, when you're lost in the darkness, look for the light. Believe in the Fireflies.
Of course, our first time stepping into Abby's shoes, she's already hunting Joel. There's no setup, no justification, just a cold pursuit. A desperate drive toward the man who, from her view, stole everything. Her father, her future, and what the Fireflies believed was humanity's last hope. We as players don't know that yet. All we see is a stranger tracking Joel's whereabouts, and when a snowstorm and an incoming horde of infected force her to team up with Joel and Tommy, it feels like a tense coincidence. Her survival depends on them, and for the moment, it feels like they might actually walk away from this unexpected encounter alive. They ride back to a nearby lodge, exchanging small talk and trust that, in this world, is usually fatal. And then Joel says his name.
I'm Mel, by the way.
Tommy. This is my brother.
Joe. Y'all act like you heard of us or something.
Because they have.
And of course, everything changes in that moment. Without warning, the entire mood shifts. Everyone tenses up and reacts to the sound of Joel's name. When he acknowledges their reaction, Abby confirms they know who he is, and immediately blows out his leg with a shotgun. Tommy's then hit multiple times to knock him unconscious. The tension snaps and the scene devolves into something raw, brutal, and deeply personal. But from our side of the screen, we're blindsided. We've spent hours, even years, connected to Joel, and now we're watching him beaten and broken by a character we barely know. Abby doesn't offer a long monologue or justification. She doesn't try to win sympathy. She simply asks him to guess who she is, and when he doesn't, she ends it with a golf club.
You stupid old man. You don't get to rush this.
It's a jarring moment, not just because of the violence, but because of the emotional whiplash. We've been handed the perspective of a character we know nothing about who just killed someone we love. In a game where emotional bonds run deep, we're now playing from the other side of grief, and that shift feels wrong, or at the very least, unnatural. But that's the point. Because Abby isn't introduced to us as a fully realized person. She's introduced as a force of consequence, a living answer to Joel's actions years before. And the structure of the game ensures we hate her before we have a chance to understand her. Only later do we start to see the truth. That beneath her hardened expression and violent purpose was a girl once full of hope. A child raised by ideals, someone who didn't just lose her father but watched the world break around that moment. Abby Anderson was born into the Fireflies. Not just into their cause, but into their inner circle. Her father, Jerry Anderson, wasn't just a doctor. He was the lead surgeon of their Salt Lake City outpost. He wasn't a soldier or ideologue. He was a healer. The kind of man who believed in empathy and saving life wherever he could, even in a world that no longer rewarded kindness. Abby grew up under that roof. His belief in a better future was something she absorbed without question. And more than just following him through the base or waiting outside surgical rooms, she lived beside his values. And we see that in a very prominent memory the developers give to us, which is Abby and her father's time at the zoo. And of course, later on in the day when Ellie and Joel finally appear. It's not a particularly long memory, but it serves its purpose in many different ways. It establishes the close relationship between her and her father. It gives us an insight to who Abby was as a person before. A young girl who had this close relationship with her dad, who talked about boys, particularly Owen. We see her get nervous when her father brings him up. They talk about training and going on or off base, and the kind of repercussions stuff like that comes with. It's a mixture of innocence, hope, and sensitivity in a world that's still very much harsh and living in the aftermath of the outbreak. It builds a connection, and it also builds a connection with her and her father, in addition to exactly what her father meant to everybody else. Jerry had left the safety of the base not for duty or medicine, but to make sure a pregnant zebra would survive the night. That same compassion, the instinct to protect life at all costs, extended beyond just patients or people. That was simply who he was. And when he pulled Abby and Owen into helping, not with orders or explanations, but because it was the right thing to do, he left something behind in both of them. Those values stuck. Abby believed in her father, in the Fireflies, and the idea that humanity still had a chance to heal, especially now that Ellie had arrived just moments later. But everything changed by the time night fell. What began with Jerry being called to the hospital because the girl they had found, Ellie, was immune, meant there was a possible end in sight, a potential cure. But to Jerry, the price was unthinkable. Her life in exchange for the world's salvation. He would hesitate, because as with most people, you aren't just one thing. Jerry wasn't just a surgeon anymore, he was a father, being asked to take a child's life even for the right reasons, and that weighed heavily on him. Abby would bring him food while he argued with Marlene, watching the decision pull at him at every single angle, but she stood beside him. She told her dad she would make the same choice. She would be willing to sacrifice herself if it meant saving the world. Her father's compassion hadn't made her soft, it made her resolute. And just as he was her bedrock, she was his. And then Joe came. He killed the Fireflies, he killed Jerry, and he took Ellie with him. Abby wouldn't see bloodshed, only the silence after it, the empty hallway, the bullet holes, the lifeless bodies, her father's body. No last words, no goodbye.
In the fucking building? Abby.
No!
Abby, don't look.
Dad! Dad! No! No!
And with that, the Fireflies, her entire world, were gone. The magnitude of what Joel took from her is massive. It was the future. It was a vision, a possible new world, while destroying the only world she knew. She didn't just lose a parent, she lost her moral compass as well. Her community, the belief that good things could still be built from ruin, and what followed wasn't anger, it was outright despair. Tragedy. But as with much grief, that kind of silence only hollows you out. And for Abby, that silence wouldn't stay. It hardened her, and it pushes people to start asking questions, to look for something or someone to blame. If she could just find the man who took everything, maybe she could understand, maybe she could breathe again, maybe she could avenge her father and everything Joel took from not just her, but from the Fireflies and from the world. The day Jerry Anderson died, Abby wasn't searching for peace anymore, she was becoming something else entirely.
I'm sorry. I know all the leads have dried up, but Joel's still out there, you know? We can still make training.
With the Fireflies gone, there was nothing left to go back to. No cause, no structure, no future. Abby and a few of the last survivors from Salt Lake City would make their way north, eventually finding a place among the Washington Liberation Front. The WLF wasn't built on ideals like the Fireflies, it was built on strength, order, and survival. And for someone that just lost everything and that needed a new purpose, or at least something to preoccupy herself with, that suited Abby just fine. And really, it gave her the outlet she needed. Day by day, she threw herself into training, not to serve the cause, not to protect the weak, but to make herself stronger, faster, more focused. The girl who once freed a zebra with her father now pushed herself to exhaustion, weaponizing every part of her body, because somewhere out there the man who broke her life was still breathing. Abby would push herself so much, in fact, that she would quickly rise through the ranks of the WLF, eventually reaching a point that no one would be willing to go hand-to-hand with her in combat. Definitely none of the other women. As time passed, Abby's mission to find Joel consumed her. The leads would grow cold, the hope of tracking him down slowly faded, but the obsession remained. A fixation that took hold less than a year after her father's death and never truly loosened its grip. That obsession became a quiet wedge between Abby and the people who had known her before she changed, most notably Owen. In the early days of their recruitment with the Washington Liberation Front, the two of them skipped out on training one day. Owen treated it like a break, a moment to enjoy what little youth they had left. He would tease her about her fear of heights, tried to make her laugh, tried to make her feel something again, desperately. Anything to bring back the girl she used to be. But Abby wasn't interested in joy. She was focused, sharpening her body, hardening her mind. She wasn't chasing strength for the WLF, she was preparing herself for a moment she replayed over and over again, the day she would finally find Joel. And when that resolution, that tunnel vision, that single-tracked mind that Abby had was clear to him the first time the two of them spent time in the aquarium, it'll hurt Owen. You can see it in the way he looked at her, like he was reaching for someone who was already slipping away. Their relationship didn't end in some dramatic collapse, it faded, eroded by time, by grief, by Abby's refusal to let go, and Owen's quiet yearning for peace. He wanted a future, and you could see that with him settling down with Mel. Meanwhile, Abby wanted justice. In the space between those two things, something unspoken was lost between them. You could even say it was just another tragedy, another consequence of what Joel did, and how deeply it affected Abby. Yeah, she and Owen remained somewhat close, but they would never truly reconnect, not in the way that they had once had. And Abby may have worn the uniform of the WLF, but for her, the war was always personal. Others in the WLF might have supported her mission, even Isaac, who gave her the freedom to pursue leads and authorized the excursion off base to go look for Joel and Jackson, but deep down, everyone knew this wasn't just about duty. I mean, it was years since Jerry was killed, and the lead they're going based off of was Joel's brother, who was a former Firefly who may not even be in Jackson anymore. When they do finally make it to the other side of the country, Owen would be the first to scout the surrounding area of Jackson. He saw the size of the settlement, the strength of its defenses, and the quiet threat behind its peace. And in that moment, the weight of what they were about to do finally settled on him. Was it worth provoking an entire community, endangering everyone for the sake of just one person? No matter how much Abby meant to him, no matter how much the closure meant to her, he didn't think so. It sounded like he was ready to walk away. Maybe they all were. And that might have been the decision had it not been for Abby venturing off on her own. Drawn by instinct to anger, or something in between, she would find herself face to face with Tommy and Joel, by pure chance, or fate. And then, just like that, Joel walked through the door, older, worn, unaware. He wouldn't suspect a thing. Considering he just saved her from the infected, it does make sense to a degree why his guard would be down and why he would give his name so freely. But for Abby, that name was all she needed. The shotgun came first, then the silence, and then the rage. She beat him, not because it felt good, and not because it would bring her father back, but because she had lived in the shadow of this moment for years. It was the only thing she'd held on to. It was the only connection to what she used to be. She wasn't with Owen anymore. Owen didn't look or treat her the same. She wasn't the same. Her father was long gone, and she doesn't hold on to the same values that he once had. The values that at one point defined her personality and her person through and through. Although, even with her rage towards Joel, even in the haze of it, she didn't lose herself completely. Because she chose to spare Tommy and Ellie. She could have finished it easily in that moment. Now looking back, that's debatable in of its own self, but for someone that's become a prominent soldier rising through the WLF ranks, running into various bandits and dangerous people, leaving up loose, untied ends, had to be something she was well aware of. But she only came for one reason, and Owen would step in and remind everyone why they came. They all came for Joel, no one else. Tommy was knocked unconscious, Ellie was too. And that was good enough because this wasn't about senseless violence or some blind hunger for rage. It was just about Joel. One wound, one man. Once he was gone, there was nothing left to prove, no speech to give, no justification to make. She would say nothing to the unconscious Ellie and Tommy, and they would all just leave. In her mind, the chapter was closed. But if grief had taught her anything, or anyone else anything, it's that nothing ever ends clean. Not love, not pain, and never revenge.
If I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die for me.
Then what are you doing here? Guilt. Needed to lighten the load a bit.
In the wake of Joel's death, something Abby had envisioned and allowed to consume her for 4 years, the last thread tying her to her father had been cut with this killing. But instead of peace, there was only more silence. Killing Joel didn't bring her peace, it didn't silence the pain, it didn't even make sense once it was all done. She still woke in cold sweats, chasing a dream down the empty halls of St. Mary's Hospital. But this dream would come to change. Her father's body was what she would typically see, a whisper of the trauma and reminder of what she lost that day, and how destructive it all was to her. But after Joel's death, Jerry wasn't behind that door anymore. Now it was Lev and Yara, strung up, torn apart, killed, the same way Abby had found her father after Joel's rampage. I believe her seeing their bodies is symbolic in many ways. For one, it reminds her of her guilt. Yara and Lev saved her from other Seraphites, or, of course, the derogatory term WLF members call them, scars. Abby was strung up and ready to be disemboweled and hanged when these two kids came out of the woods, cut her down, and ran by her side to safety, eventually helping her get her gear back from another scar that stole it from her, and then helping her way out of a building overrun by infected. Abby, of course, did her part to help as well, carrying Yara, who had a broken arm, to safety, helping her set it, and letting Lev know he needed to move with his sister by morning because they're in a highly patrolled area. Abby's dream is her well aware that leaving those two kids to fend for themselves, especially with Yara in the state that she was in, was a death sentence. She would have to go to save them. At its core, Yara and Lev truthfully were Abby's humanity returning to her. That initial dream set the precedent, and then saving her, I think, showed in practice that regardless of beliefs, religions, or what side of the war you're on, at the end of the day, you are facing another person who lost their own sense of direction. But remorse doesn't always have clarity. Sometimes it comes in waves, quiet, sharp, unexpected. Abby felt it when she looked at Yara's shattered arm. She felt it when she tried to sleep that night next to Owen and dreamed of what would happen to the kids if she just walked away, something she came dangerously close to considering. She felt it in how she used to see the Seraphites, not as people but as monsters, fanatics, scars. But Yara and Lev saved her, and that changed everything. So when the time came to return the favor, she didn't hesitate. It wasn't just about saving Yara, it was about doing something right, something her father would have believed in. Joel's connection to him was revenge. With Joel dead and that weight seemingly lifted, now Abby's connection to Jerry wasn't pain, anger, loss. It was that emotional compassion he had taught her back to that day in the zoo. It's what compels her to return to help them out, to then scale rooftops suspended high above broken streets of Seattle, pushing through her own personal fear of heights to reach the hospital just in order to gather the supplies to save Yara's life. Was there complicated guilt tied to that mission as well? Of course. There was shame and anger in the person she allowed herself to become. She even admits it quietly to both Yara and Lev on separate occasions.
I'm gonna die for me.
Then what are you doing here? Why did you come back for us? Guilt.
What? You don't owe us anything.
I just needed to lighten the load a bit.
She's vague, but she doesn't entirely deflect. Nor does she try to sound noble. She just says it's to lighten the load towards Lev. And later on, by Yara's side, when they head to the Seraphite Island together in a desperate attempt to reach Lev before he reaches his mom, Yara would ask the same thing. Why is Abby going against her friends, Owen and Mel? Why is she placing herself between the Seraphites, who are no longer friends of either Yara or Lev, dangerous enemies to all three of them now, while potentially putting herself in harm's way with the looming threat of the WLF invasion? And all she says was because of guilt. Abby saw something in them she hadn't seen in years. People worth saving, not just survivors, but a mirror of who she used to be. And in that reflection, she began to understand the cost of everything she had chased. The years spent hollowed by vengeance, the rage that burned through anything good that remained. Owen saw and felt it too. He was already trying to walk away from the WLF, from the war, from the life they were still pretending to believe in. And Abby, she had no stake in any of this anymore. Not in Isaac's crusade, hell, she's already went AWOL, and not in this endless bloodshed. Her place in the WLF had become a cage she no longer pretended to be proud of, if she ever was to begin with. She didn't just relate to Lev and Yara's pain, she recognized it. Like Lev, she had been betrayed by the world she once trusted. Like Yara, she had tried to protect what little she had left, but more than anything, Abby saw herself in them. The girl who had once believed in her father's kindness and the power of helping others in something close to hope. And the longer she walked beside both Yara and Lev, the more that forgotten part of her began to return. But it wasn't easy. Mel still saw a killer. Owen saw someone he used to love and didn't recognize anymore. Even Abby couldn't fully trust the version of herself that was starting to care again. The WLF had hardened her, made her efficient, brutal, closed off. She had learned to kill without pause, to survive without reflection. The woman she became after St. Mary's Hospital had no room for guilt, only forward motion, only orders. And now, after all that time, that armor was cracking. She began to question everything: Isaac's orders, the righteousness of their war, even her own identity. Owen had said it plainly long ago. She stopped looking for the light. And maybe she had. Maybe she had seen that truth before if she was even ready to admit it. Helping these two kids wasn't just about saving them, though. It was about proving to herself that she hadn't vanished entirely, that somewhere beneath the scars and the silence, the old Abby, the one who believed in something more, still existed. And after gathering those supplies and saving Yara, finally seeing her father on the other side of that hospital door, no more sirens, no more trauma, no more death, no more regret, only him there, happy, healthy, and well, had to have proven that she finally did find herself.
We let you both live. And you wasted it.
Stand up! Now!
Don't you fucking dare!
Shut the fuck up!
Now, if we go back to when the game forces us to change perspectives from Ellie to Abby. After a good chunk of time in Abby's shoes, we now have a well thought out understanding of who Abby was, what she's been through, and now we also understand the person Abby is. When she walks into this theater, she's reached a very similar crossroads. She's progressed. She had saved Lev, buried Yara unfortunately, survived her own people turning against her. She had grieved, changed, fought for something beyond just revenge, fought for her own personal redemption, and then she found them. Mel, Owen, gone. The aquarium, once her refuge, was now a tomb. And when she found Owen's body, her strength gave out. She collapsed to the floor, dropped to her knees, and wept so hard she vomited. There was no fight left in her, no rage, no purpose, just loss. Probably the only substantial loss since the death of her father. Then she saw the map, a map that led her to the Pinnacle Theater, a map that confirmed who was responsible, the girl she had once spared, the girl Joel had once saved, Ellie. And just like that, everything Abby had buried came roaring back. She stormed the theater like a force of nature, armed, furious, grieving. When she saw Jesse, he didn't even have time to raise a weapon. When she saw Tommy, she beat him to the ground. And when she saw Ellie, face to face, they were no longer strangers. They were equals. Both had lost everything. Both had blood on their hands. Both were broken. But Abby didn't care. Not anymore. Ellie had taken Owen, Mel, the only remnants of her past she was trying to salvage, and there was even a glimmer of potentially having a future of all of them, moving far away and beyond all of this. But Ellie stole that from her, and Abby wasn't going to explain anything. She wasn't going to negotiate. She aimed her weapon at Ellie and prepared to finish it once and for all. The fight that followed wasn't a set piece, it was an unraveling. They didn't speak, they didn't plead, they just tore each other apart. Ellie fought with the desperation of someone who had nothing left to lose. Abby, on the other hand, fought with the fury of someone who thought they had already given up everything, and now had more ripped away. It was ugly, brutal, raw. But by the time Abby had Ellie on the floor, bloodied and broken, it felt like the same woman she had beaten Joel was back. That cold, relentless killer. The version of Abby who didn't hesitate, who made pain her purpose. And then Dina came.
Stop! She had nothing to do with this. She's pregnant. Good. Abby.
Sick, terrified, fighting to protect Ellie, Dina slashed at Abby in a final attempt to stop the cycle. Abby struck back, slamming Dina into the ground, beating her senseless, and when Lev appeared, Abby didn't stop. Knife in hand, breathing heavy, she was about to finish what Ellie started, until Ellie said two words. Not loud, not commanding, just present. She's pregnant. And in that moment, the rage apexed. Abby was ready and willing to slice her throat open, to give Ellie that final blow that Ellie gave to Abby, ripping everything and everyone she ever cared about right from underneath her. That was until she saw Lev. Abby froze at the look on his face, and she realized the girl beneath her, gasping and bruised, was carrying life, and Mel had been pregnant too, and now Mel was dead. Abby stared down at Dina and Ellie, at the wreckage they'd made of each other, and for the first time in hours, she saw herself, not as a warrior, not as an avenger, but as someone who almost made the same mistake twice. She dropped the knife, looked Ellie in the eyes, and said the one thing that made sure they would never meet again.
Don't ever let me see you again. Come on.
And she turned away, not because she was weak, but because she finally understood what strength really was. She found herself with Lev, and she chose to hang on to that. When Abby walked out of the theater, she wasn't the person who walked in. She didn't feel powerful, she didn't feel justified, she just felt tired. So much of her life had been defined by what was taken from her. Her father, her home, her future, her community, and now Owen, Mel, Alice. Even the Salt Lake crew, scattered, dead, or broken. There was no one left to fight for, no one left to bury, and yet she was still breathing, still standing. We don't see her dream of St. Mary's Hospital that night. No hospital corridors, no blood, no screams, just the sound of waves, distant and faint. One could only imagine that she didn't know where to go next. But for the first time in years, she knew where she couldn't go back. Not the WLF, not revenge, not who she used to be. She wasn't searching for Joel anymore. She wasn't even searching for peace. She was just searching for something beyond survival. And for the first time in a long time, she hoped she'd find it.
We're looking for Fireflies. I was part of the Salt Lake outpost. Dr. Jerry Anderson. He was my dad.
Abby didn't have a home anymore. Not in Jackson, not in Seattle, not even in memory. What she did have was a name, a frequency, a hope passed between whispers that the Fireflies, what was left of them, might still exist somewhere, far from war, far from death, far from who she used to be. So she and Lev followed that hope to Santa Barbara, to the edge of the world. And for a while it felt real. They found a house, a basement, a radio. They heard voices on the other end. Fireflies regrouping on Catalina Island. It was a second chance, and in a way, it was almost as if she was honoring the memory of Owen. This was his pilgrimage after all, his vision, his hope. But second chances don't always come easy. Before they could leave, they were taken, captured by the Rattlers, chained, starved, and beaten. Abby, once feared, once formidable, was now a prisoner rotting on a beach. A body with no strength, a name spoken only in whispers by the name who broke her. And that might have been the end of her story if Ellie hadn't come. Ellie, the same girl who had killed her friends, hunted her across a ruined city, and had been left broken in that theater. Now she stood before her again, blade in hand, offering no kindness, not to talk, not to forgive, just to fight. And Abby, emaciated and barely standing, refused. She wouldn't raise her fists. She wouldn't play that game again. She had Lev. She had a boat. She had somewhere to go. It wasn't until Ellie threatened Lev by holding the knife up to him that Abby relented, agreeing to fight Ellie on her terms. I think many people are dissatisfied with this ending for a plethora of reasons. The main one being, at the end of the day, it wasn't graceful, it wasn't cinematic, it was just two people with nothing left to give, trying to claw closure out of one another's flesh. And just when it seemed like Ellie would win, just when Abby was drowning beneath the weight of it all, Ellie stopped. She foregone her own life, her own future, her own peace for this, to just relent and let Abby go. And Abby took that chance. She packed Lev in a boat, and together they drifted toward Catalina, not to find a cause, not to rebuild a movement, but to begin again, together, somewhere beyond just survival. Abby Anderson was never meant to be easy to love. She was written to challenge us, to disrupt comfort, to force a perspective we didn't ask for, and might never fully accept. And that's exactly why she matters. Because when stories ask us to love the people we already agree with, that's safe, it's easy, it's a natural way of doing things. But when they ask us to understand someone we once hated, especially from the jump, it's a lot braver. Abby isn't a hero. She's not a villain either. She's a girl who lost her father, then lost herself trying to make sense of that pain. She let anger guide her, build a life on strength alone, and still found herself empty. But instead of breaking, she changed, quietly, slowly, painfully. And when she was given the chance to become the monster others believed her to be, she chose not to. That's the story buried under all the discourse. Not one of revenge, but of release. Of what it costs to survive and what it takes to let go. If Ellie's journey was about holding on to love through grief, then Abby's was about finding it again through guilt. They're not opposites, they're reflections. Two sides of a cycle that only ends when someone decides to stop. And Abby was the one to make that call. So wherever she is now, be it Catalina or some far-off coast. She didn't find peace by escaping the past, she found it by carrying something forward. It wasn't vengeance, it wasn't legacy, just light.